Chapter 19. How do we move to the front of the train? Ridge asked, lying flat atop the load of coal. Tina and I had just released hands after what seemed like forever. I don't know why people would ever choose to hold hands. It got all sweaty. Ridge raised a good question. In the movies, people leaped from train car to train car as though they were going on a walk in the park. Now that I was on the back of the speeding freight train, I had a feeling it might be a little more difficult than that. There are probably 5 cars ahead of us, I said, at least. I tried to think back to where I had seen them climb aboard. Tina lifted her head to examine the long train before us. Her black hair whipped wildly, but she didn't seem as frightened as I might have expected. Determined. That was how Tina looked with her face to the wind. We should be able to make our way up, she said. Most of the rear cars are carrying coal like this one. If there's a ladder between each car, then we can try to get to the front without any unnecessary wishing. I liked the idea of not collecting another consequence, but I was doubtful about my ability to climb forward on the speeding train with only one arm. Okay, I said, but I might need some help. Don't worry, Ridge said, trying to suppress a smile. I can give you a hand. Ha! Tina wasted no time crawling across the lumps of coal, with Vale falling in beside her. Ridge and I began making our way also, trying to keep our heads low so the wind wouldn't push us back. We reached the edge of the train car and watched as Tina and Vale maneuvered themselves onto the ladder. From there, they reached out to the next coal car, grasping its ladder and hoisting themselves into the open bed. When Ridge and I followed, it was much scarier than it had looked after watching Tina. The track was thundering right below my feet, and a single slip would be the end of me. If I fell, there wouldn't even be enough time to spout out a wish. Ridge helped me get across the ladders in my one-armed state, and soon we were finding a rhythm to this dangerous maneuver. There was no sign of Thackeray or his father in the first 5 cars. If they had climbed aboard here, they must have moved forward too. But it was exhausting crawling across the mounds of coal and shimmying up the up and down ladders, and my whole body ached. We pressed on 3 more units until we reached a new type of freight car. It was enclosed on the top, and I guessed it wasn't hauling coal. We paused before approaching it. The 4 of us whipped to tatters in the wind as we knelt in the final coal car and tried to gauge what was ahead. There's a hole in the top of that car, Vale said, daring to rise higher than the rest of us. Does it look man-made? Ridge asked. Isn't this whole train man-made? I pointed out. I was wondering if the hole looks like it's part of the original design, Ridge said, or does it look like somebody broke it open? No, said Vale. The edges look ragged, like something ripped through the metal. Thackeray's in there, I whispered. My words swept away in the rush of wind. Thackeray's in there, said Tina, in a slightly louder voice, so the others could actually hear her. I felt like she kind of stole my thunder. We need to get inside and secure the boy's mouth before he can make a wish, Vale said. The father might be a challenge, so you 2 keep him occupied. That last bit was directed at me and Ridge. Why do we have to fight the pirate? Ridge asked. I'd rather take the boy. And what kind of experience do you have in capturing a wishmaker? Vale asked. It's my quest to stop him, I said. I thought you 2 were supposed to save his life. I'm supposed to save an ex-wishmaker, Tina clarified. We'll have to keep him hostage until his genie time runs out. Then I can work on saving him. That's one way of doing it, Ridge said. Fine, we'll take the dad, I said, agreeing to the original plan. I wasn't crazy about it either. I knew he could be dangerous in his own right, even without a genie. But there's something I'd better do first. Ridge looked at me. What's suddenly so important? Moo, I answered. Why are you talking about a moo? Oh, moo, I answered. Why are you talking about a moo right now? He asked. It's a word I've never really used, and I don't think I'll ever say it by accident. I looked at him. I'm going to use it as my trigger word. Trigger for what? I wish, I began, that every time I say the word moo, you will transform from your regular human form into, I paused for dramatic effect, a shark that swims in the air. I'd put a lot of thought into it, and I felt like an air shark was the right way to go. Could you have come up with anything cooler? Whoa, Ridge grinned, clearly impressed by the idea. But I could tell the universe was cooking up a good counterbalance to my wish with some sort of disadvantage. If you want me to transform, he said, then every time I am in shark form, you will only be able to belly scoot. Belly scoot? I said, unfamiliar with that term. Yeah, said Ridge. You'll have to lie on your stomach and scoot across the floor to get around, like a baby. I lifted one hand to my head and thought, if I had an air shark doing battle for me, then it wouldn't really matter if I could barely move, right? Let's do this, I said. Bazang. My hourglass watch collapsed on my wrist, and I glanced over to see if the girls were impressed by my pay-as-you-play wish. An air shark? Tina asked. I grinned. Air shark versus wolf. Who do you think would win? I don't see why it matters, Tina replied. We're on the same team. I'm not talking about Ridge versus Vale, I said. Just hypothetically. Air shark and gray wolf. Who would be better? An air shark isn't a real thing, Tina said. It is now, I replied. Look, we'd better get in there, Vale said, pointing to the boxcar before us. And if you need help taking down Thackeray's father, I'm sure we can do it after we've captured the Wishmaker. Thanks, I said, a second before realizing that she was mocking us by doubting our ability to take down the man. We'll be just fine. I was feeling overly confident now that I could turn my genie into a shark. Here we go. Tina dropped over the edge of the coal car and swung to the ladder on the rear of the boxcar. In a moment, all four of us were across, perched a short distance away from the hole in the roof. Tina and Vale shared a quick glance, their faces flushed from the afternoon heat. Then Tina muttered, "Paradiddle," and Vale became the giant gray wolf, her fur matted in the strong wind. Wolf Vale leaped forward, disappearing as she fell through the hole in the roof of the boxcar. Tina crawl-hopped the short distance, grasped the rough metal edge, and dropped out of sight. I looked at Ridge, a smirk of awesomeness spreading across my face at what we were about to do. Moo moo, I shouted. Instantly, my genie transformed into a huge silvery shark. He turned to me, grinning with his frightening mouth, double rows of razor-sharp teeth flashing in the sunlight. Then, without feet or hands for traction, my new shark went sliding backward across the roof of the boxcar, fins flailing. I tensed, but even if I had wanted to jump in, I wouldn't have been able to. My stomach felt glued to the metal roof, and my only means of moving was dragging myself forward with my single arm. I quickly realized that Ridge was about to snap our tether, which would fling me off the train to my doom. Swim! I screamed. Hadn't I wished that the shark would be able to swim in the air? It's not that easy, Ridge replied, his speech slurred and his shark mouth looking very odd as he formed words. I'm a fish out of water. He bounced across the coal in the car behind me. Use your fins, I coached, wondering how absurd we must have looked. A boy lying on his stomach atop a speeding freight train, giving swimming lessons to a talking shark. Does it get any weirder than that? I estimated about 41 and a half feet of distance between us when Ridge finally figured out what his tail was for. Suddenly he lifted into the air, swimming with purpose, though not yet with grace. That's it, I called. Now let's get in there. I used my one arm to point to the hole in the boxcar. Ridge sped forward, fighting hard to match and then beat the speed of the freight train. After what seemed like ages, he had positioned his shark body directly above the hole. I was slithering forward as quickly as I could, and I watched the air shark prepare for the dive into the boxcar. His tail tipped up, his conical nose angled downward, and he plunged into the hole. There was only one problem. Shark Ridge was bigger than the hole in the roof. He got wedged just past his front fins. His tail thrashed back and forth in a hopeless attempt to dislodge himself. I put my face into my single palm and shook my head. So much for our grand debut. Seeing that there was only one possible way to free my genie shark, I shouted, "Moo-moo!" and watched him transform back into the skinny boy I knew, at the same time falling through the opening into the boxcar. My consequence ended, and I was able to rise to my knees, crawling the remaining distance and swinging down through the hole. I nearly landed on top of Ridge, causing both of us to fall flat. As quickly as I could, I jumped to my feet, scanning the area and preparing for the worst. There was plenty of open space in the boxcar, and daylight angled down through the jagged opening in the roof. Tina was standing with her back to the wall. Vale, now returned to human form, knelt on the floor of the boxcar beside a single prisoner. I recognized his slick blonde hair, black leather jacket, and oversized shoes. We had captured Thackeray Anderson. Chapter 20. Seeing the boy as Vale's prisoner gave me a swell of victory, but Ridge and I had the assignment of taking down the pirate-talking man. I raised my single hand as though I knew karate and spun in a rapid circle, scanning all four corners for the man we despised. His dad's not here, Tina said. I relaxed my ninja stance as Ridge took a step closer to the girls. In case you guys happen to miss that, he said, a smile on his face, I was a shark, an actual shark. He nodded. Pretty cool. It would have been cooler if you'd fit through the hole in the roof, I muttered, turning back to our prisoner. Now that my eyes had adjusted to the dim light of the car, I noticed something new about him. The boy had grown a full beard since I'd seen him on Mount Rushmore. I wondered what wish he had made to give him this new distinguished look. Where's your dad? I demanded. I didn't like the idea of that cruel man out on his own. He's not going to answer right now, Vale said, tying off a strip of cloth around Thackeray's mouth. His wrists were already tied together in front of him. Where's his genie? I asked, knowing that she had to be close by. Right there, said Tina, holding up a glass pickle jar. Shut away for now. I felt much more confident knowing that Thackeray was unable to access his genie. I stared down at the boy, who the universe had described as a very bad person. It's over, Thackeray, I said. He made a sequence of grunts and groans, but nothing was intelligible with a gag in his mouth. I grinned at Tina. One step closer to completing my quest, I said. Now we've just got to keep him locked up for, I did the math, about 4 more days. The boy made some more sounds in an attempt to talk, but we weren't going to take such a foolish risk with a dangerous wishmaker like him, even if Tina was holding his genie in a jar. On his knees in the hot boxcar, Thackeray looked up at me. The sunlight angled in from above, and I saw that his right eye was bright yellow. just like Tina and me. He must have accepted the same consequence at Mount Rushmore. It gave me a twinge of satisfaction to see that Thackeray also had to endure the crazy eye. The boy made a gesture with his bound hands. He wasn't reckless enough to try to strip off the gag. Vale made it obvious that she would be on him before he could get it. He held one hand in front of him, using his other hand to draw something on the palm. I think he's trying to tell us that his palms are itchy, Ridge said. Don't be ridiculous, I replied. I think he's offering to read our palms and tell the future. Probably a trick. Or, said Tina, he wants to write a message since we won't allow him to speak. The boy made a few more strained speaking sounds, his eyes casting desperately around the boxcar. Then he scrambled forward, using his bound hands to grasp a small piece of coal that must have tumbled into the boxcar with our arrival. Hunched over the dirty floor, Thackeray Anderson began scraping a message. I watched the letters appear, but I couldn't actually read it because of my consequence. When he was finished writing, the boy rocked back on his heels and let us have a clear look. Tina and Vale shared a look of confusion. Ridge scratched his head, jaws slightly agape. What? I said. What does it say? Ridge pointed to the coal-scribed letters on the floor and read them aloud. I am not Thackeray Anderson. Chapter 21. The four of us stared in silence at the message on the floor, while the captive boy watched us. Did you read that wrong? I finally asked Ridge. I know how to read, he said defensively. I am not Thackeray Anderson. I know you aren't, I said to Ridge. But if he isn't, I pointed to the stranger, then who is? The boy made a bunch of sounds like he wanted to explain himself. I'll admit I was tempted to untie his mouth so we could get to the bottom of this. Do you want me to untie his mouth so we can get to the bottom of this? Ridge asked. I looked to Tina and Vale, but the girls were still silently pondering the message. I don't know, I said to Ridge. What do you think? It seems a little trappy to me. Trappy? I asked. You know, like a trap, said Ridge. He probably just wrote that so we would let him speak. And before we can do anything, he'll grab his jar, the genie will appear, and he'll make some horrible wish, and then we'll be thrown through the roof before you can say moo-moo. I won't, said the boy, who claimed not to be Thackeray. The sound of his voice caused me and Ridge to stagger backward in surprise. How did he get loose? I swung my fist in his direction, in case he felt like pouncing at me. Vale stepped back from him, holding the strip of cloth that had bound his mouth. He can't do us any harm, she said, not while Tina has his genie in the pickle jar. I guess that made sense. In order to grant a wish, the genie had to be out of the jar. In order to call her out of the jar, the boy would have to be holding it. She's in there most of the time, the boy answered. That's awful, Ridge said to the prisoner. Why would you keep your genie sealed up? Do you know what it's like inside that jar? No wonder the universe said you were a horrible person. The universe described me to you? The boy said. It's our quest to stop you, I said, from opening the undiscovered genie jar. I narrowed my eyes at him suspiciously. Unless you really aren't Thackeray Anderson, as you claim. I'm not, he said. My name is Jathan. Jason? I asked. No, Jathan. Come on, I said, rolling my eyes. Thackeray Jathan? I'm not making it up, the boy insisted. My name is Jathan. He took a deep breath, and I had the feeling that he was about to say something we didn't want to hear. My father is Thackeray Anderson. No, I shouted. That super mean pirate talking guy that ditched us on the interstate after we changed his tire? The same super mean pirate talking guy who pushed me off a cliff? Ridge added. The boy nodded. That's my dad. He looked at me defiantly in the face. his yellow eye twitching. Where is he now? Tina asked. Why wasn't your father in here when we found you? We got separated. Jathan studied us helplessly. What are you going to do to my dad? He asked. It's not possible, muttered Vale. One of you must be lying. To my surprise, the red-headed genie was looking between Jathan and me. Lying? I cried. What would I have to lie about? Vale took a step toward me. Tina watched intently from across the boxcar. You said your quest was to stop Thackeray Anderson from opening the undiscovered genie jar, but only kids can become wishmakers. She jabbed a finger in my direction. So either you're lying about your quest, then she pointed at Jathan, who was kneeling on the floor, or you're lying about your dad being Thackeray. We might both be telling the truth, Jathan said. I can explain. Vale backed away from us, and I wondered if her natural angry form was even scarier than her gray wolf. My dad, the boy said, rising slowly to his feet. Thackeray. He was a wishmaker years ago when he was a kid. He made some bad choices and took on some tough consequences that he's had to live with forever. So he's the ex-wishmaker, not you, Tina exclaimed, stepping forward with interest. Jathan nodded. That's why my dad could see the Rockmen. Since he was once a wishmaker, he can see through the universe's shield against magical suspicion. How long ago did you get your genie? Tina followed up. About 3 days, he answered. Same as us, I pointed out. Once I became a wishmaker, Jathan continued, my genie changed everything. With this power, I have to help my dad. Why would you want to help that guy? Ridge asked. He's awful. You don't understand. I have to help him, Jathan emphasized. If I don't, it's going to rain pianos for 100 years. Pianos? I questioned. Jathan nodded. That's a consequence if I fail my quest. I found it strange that Jathan, too, was fighting to prevent such a terrible consequence. Zombie cats and dogs, lemonade flood, or raining pianos. 3 unusual and unpleasant ways for the world to end. So your quest is to help your dad? Tina asked him. Jathan nodded. The universe has instructed me to help the person I'm closest to in achieving his greatest desire. He sniffed. My dad can be awful sometimes. Pretty much all the time. But he's the only one who's always there for me. So what does Thackeray Anderson want so bad? Tina said. He wants to make a wish, Jathan answered. One that my genie can't grant. But your dad can't make wishes, I said. He's not a wishmaker anymore. And he can't be, insisted Vale. Adults can't become wishmakers. It's against the rules. The undiscovered genie has a power to break the rules, Jathan said. You're saying that your dad can become a wishmaker? I hated to think of what that horrible man might wish for. If anyone were to wish for the zombie pet apocalypse, it would be him. The undiscovered genie is different, Jathan said. That's why he was locked away. I'll help my dad open that jar. Then he can finally wish for his greatest desire. Not going to happen, I shouted. I will stop Thackeray Anderson. The world depends on it. Wait a minute, Ridge cut in. Does anyone see a problem here? I can see several, Tina said. I'm talking about our quests, said Ridge. Ours is to stop Thackeray Anderson from opening the jar, but Jathan's is to help him do it. The genie shook his head. If Ace fails, the world is destroyed by zombie cats and dogs. If Jathan fails, the world is destroyed by raining the piano concerto of doom. And I'm supposed to save his life, Tina said. Add a lemonade to the mix. It's a lose-lose situation, I muttered, stepping back from Jathan. Why would the universe do this to us? It wouldn't. Vale closed her eyes, apparently deep in thought. There has to be some way for all of your quests to be fulfilled. You really think so? I asked, because this just seems like another one of the universe's demented jokes. This isn't about the universe, Tina said. It's about us. What do you mean? I asked. It's our choices, she said, our wishes. Tina's right, said Vale. As long as you can make your own choices, there is hope. Not even the universe can mess with that. I turned back to Jathan. He had to know something to help it all make sense. I was tempted to say the trigger word and use my air shark to scare some answers out of him. But if we forced Jathan to speak, couldn't he just tell us lies? I turned to Ridge. I wish this kid would tell us everything he knows about the undiscovered genie. Jathan's face paled at my audacious wish. My hourglass flipped open and Ridge laid things out for me. If you want Jathan to tell you more about the undiscovered genie, he said, then you have to tell everyone here about your greatest desire. I looked at him as though he had just betrayed me. Ridge already knew what my greatest desire was. I had made the wish just a few hours ago. He shrugged apologetically, and I remembered that he hadn't come up with that consequence. I didn't need any extra clarification on this one. I just had to think it over. Was it a good idea to let Tina and Vale know about my past? Or rather, my lack of a past? Let alone Jathan. He was the bad guy. It felt wrong to tell them all something so personal to me. But we really needed to know more about the undiscovered genie. Jathan claimed this new genie was different, and according to the universe, Thackeray was going to use him to end the world with zombie pets. Sorry, Ace, Ridge muttered. I looked at Tina, then Vale, and last at Jathan Anderson. Fine. Bazang, I said. Part of me hoped I could keep my mouth shut and not blab about my mysterious past. But I knew that wouldn't be the case. I could already feel the universe compelling me to tell the others. Might as well get this over with. Okay, I'll go first, I said, taking a deep breath. I don't know where I came from. Everyone stared at me in silence for a moment. Then Tina said, Nebraska? I rolled my eyes. Well, obviously, but before that. Can't you ask your parents? Vale responded. That's just it, I said. I don't have parents. I don't have siblings. I don't even know my real name. Ace, Tina said, is what they named me because of this. I pulled the folded playing card from my pocket. The Ace of Hearts. It's the only thing I have. Not even a single memory before I was 9 years old. I want to know where I came from. Is my family out there waiting for me to come home? I looked at Jathan and wondered again if the universe had threatened such a heavy consequence because I was related to the Andersons. Jathan certainly didn't seem to recognize me, and we looked nothing alike. I want to get some answers about who I really am, I concluded. That's my greatest desire. It felt awkwardly quiet in the boxcar, the only sound the rhythmic thump of the train's wheels on the track. I no longer felt the universe urging me to say more, but I knew I had paid off the consequence by giving them the most personal bit of information I had. Now, Ridge said, dispelling the silence, it's your turn, Jathan Anderson, Thon of Thackeray Anderson. You said Thon instead of son, I said to Ridge. No, I didn't, he replied. I said Thackeray Anderson. And now you just said fed instead of said. Well, you just said and fed instead of instead, Ridge answered. Guys, Tina yelled, abruptly ending her discussion. She pointed at Jathan. Tell us what else you know about the undiscovered genie. She seemed very interested to collect on my wish now that I had paid the consequence. Jathan began to shake his head in defiance. but I saw the universe work its magic, and suddenly he was spewing valuable information like a fire hydrant. Except fire hydrants spew water. My father wants to use the undiscovered genie to make a wish that will remove all his old consequences, Jathan said. Lifelong consequences that he's carried for 30 years. Well, that would explain why he talked like a pirate all the time. Impossible, said Vale. You can't wish to undo consequences. That's what we thought, said Jathan. But my father convinced me to make a wish to find out if there was any way to remove them. He shrugged, an uncomfortable gesture with both hands still tied up. Since I needed to help my dad to complete my quest, I made the wish. What was your consequence? Ridge asked. No friends, Jathan answered. I mean, I can't make friends, but I'll never be able to spend time with them. Or I can make friends, but I'll never be able to spend time with them forever. So basically you're grounded for life? That was just cruel. Jathan made me feel better about the consequences I'd accepted. The thing about meeting other wishmakers was that someone else always seemed to have it worse than you. I took the consequence and learned that my dad could erase his old consequences by opening the jar of the undiscovered genie, said Jathan. Long ago, the original wishmakers locked his jar into a secret cave. So I made another wish to know how I could get inside the cave. We know about the tasks, I said, and we know that anyone who accomplishes the tasks will be granted a key to enter the cave of the undiscovered genie. I gave a victorious smirk. We've found your notebook. Why would you write down something so valuable? Tina asked. I couldn't speak at the time, Jathan answered. It was a consequence for, well, it's a long story. But my dad was too impatient to get the information that I'd learned about the tasks, so I wrote it down so he could read it. He scrunched his face in confusion. How did you guys find out what I wrote? We ripped out the pages and burnt them. The universe told us, I said, and I paid an arm and a leg to figure it out. Actually, not a leg, just an arm, but still. What was your consequence for learning about the tasks? Ridge asked. I got this jacket, Jathan answered, looking down at his black leather apparel. That's a pretty cool-looking consequence if you ask me, I said. How come mine never turned out that nice? Jathan shook his head. He looked down bitterly at the leather he was wearing. It's not as cool as it looks. I can't take it off for the rest of the week. So you have to wear a black jacket, I replied. It's not that bad. The inside is lined with sandpaper. Ouch, that had to hurt. I glared at the boy. Go on, I demanded. There's only one more thing I know, said the boy, but he was trembling, trying uselessly to hold it back. Spill it, Jathan, I shouted, all of it. The undiscovered genie can grant any wish, and once you open his jar and tether yourself to him, you get the first wish. Jathan held his breath, as if trying not to say the next part. Consequence-free. Consequence-free, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. I wouldn't have believed him if he weren't obligated to speak the truth. That's all I'm forced to say, Jathan said, slowly bowing his bearded face into the shadows of the boxcar. The rest of us were silent, contemplating the idea of a wish with no consequence. What would you wish for? What's that one thing that you desire more than anything else? You know what mine is, and thanks to the consequence I had just accepted, now everyone else in the boxcar knew it too. I could find out my past. My father is out there, Jathan said, his voice barely audible, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants most. The undiscovered genie, I muttered. A wish without a consequence.